At 4:53 p.m. local time on January 12, 2010, the capital of an entire country vanished in 35 seconds. Not from a bombing, not from a tsunami. The ground simply shifted 2 meters, and the city, home to 3 million people, was reduced to ruins. 3 days later, satellites were able to take the first clear images. All that remained of Port-au-Prince was gray dust with jutting concrete debris. But to understand what happened on January 12th, we need to go back a couple of years. The country before the disaster. January 2010. Haiti is not just a poor country. It is a country in the Western Hemisphere where 80% of the population lives on less than $2 a day. The average life expectancy is 61 years. The literacy rate is 53%. Port-au-Prince in 2010 was a city built on despair. After the overthrow of the Duvalier dictatorship in 1986 and a series of coups, hundreds of thousands of rural residents flooded into the capital in search of work. The city's population grew from 500,000 in 1980 to nearly 3 million by 2010. 3 million people lived in a city that was completely ill-suited for them. Building codes existed only on paper. 60% of the buildings were constructed without permits, without engineering supervision, and using substandard concrete and rebar. Many homes were built on the hillsides surrounding the city, on unstable ground. For 240 years, tectonic stress has been building up, like energy in a coiled spring. Geologists were aware of this danger. In 2008, just 2 years before the disaster, a group of scientists from the University of Texas published a study in which they explicitly warned that the Enriquillo Fault had accumulated critical stress equivalent to a magnitude 7.2 earthquake. But there is a vast gulf between scientific warnings and actual preparedness in one of the world's poorest countries. The disaster, 4:53:10 p.m. Tuesday, January 12, 2010. A typical hot day. School children were in class, the markets were bustling with people, and meetings were underway in government buildings. At 4:53:10 p.m., 13 kilometers below the surface, 25 kilometers southwest of Port-au-Prince, the Enriquillo Fault suddenly shifted. The eastern block shifted eastward, the western block westward. The displacement ranged from 1.8 to 2 meters. The magnitude was 7.0 on the Richter scale. The energy released during the 35 seconds of the main shock was equivalent to the explosion of 32 atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima. But unlike an explosion, which occurs at a single point, this energy spread in waves through the Earth's crust, amplifying in the loose soil beneath the city. The seismological station in Port-au-Prince recorded a peak ground acceleration of 0.5 g, meaning the ground was moving with an acceleration equal to half of Earth's gravitational pull. By comparison, in buildings not designed to withstand such loads, the critical threshold is around 0.15 g. Concrete columns literally exploded. Buildings did not collapse. They collapsed like houses of cards, floor by floor. Buildings with 3 to 5 stories proved particularly vulnerable, not low enough to withstand the forces, but tall enough to create enormous pressure on the ground floor, where shops, schools, and offices, places where people congregate, were typically located. The first minutes. The presidential palace, a symbol of Haitian statehood, a snow-white building with a dome, collapsed. President René Préval and his wife survived only because they were not in the main building. The National Assembly building was destroyed. Notre Dame Cathedral collapsed. The main hospital in Port-au-Prince lay in ruins. The UN headquarters at the Christopher Hotel collapsed, burying 102 staff members beneath it. But the worst was happening not in government buildings. In densely populated areas, Carrefour, Delma, Pétionville, residential buildings were collapsing. Thousands of buildings, tens of thousands of people were trapped under the rubble. The earthquake struck at the end of the school day. Schools were full of children. Hospitals were full of patients. Markets were full of shoppers. It was the worst possible combination of time and place. A night of chaos. When the main tremor subsided, a deathly silence fell over Port-au-Prince. Then the screams began. There was no electricity. The entire power grid had collapsed. The water supply had stopped working. Cell service was down. The hospitals that hadn't collapsed were overflowing with the wounded. But without electricity, without water, without medicine, Haiti had no organized rescue service. There were no fire brigades equipped to clear debris. There were no ambulances. People tried to dig out their loved ones with their bare hands, using pieces of rebar as levers. By midnight, there were about 1 million people in the streets. They weren't hiding in their homes because there were no homes left, or because they feared aftershocks, repetitive tremors that could bring down already damaged buildings. And these fears were well-founded. In the first 12 hours alone, there were 52 aftershocks with a magnitude greater than 4.5. Dawn over the ruins. The morning of January 13th revealed the scale of the disaster. By the most conservative estimates, 280,000 buildings were destroyed or seriously damaged. This means that approximately 1.5 million people, half the city's population, were left homeless. Entire neighborhoods had been wiped off the face of the earth. The University of Haiti was destroyed. 200 students and faculty members were killed. Saint Gerard School collapsed during classes, killing 93 children and 10 teachers. Haiti has lost its intellectual elite. Engineers, doctors, teachers, and civil servants, those who worked in the capital's buildings, those who were supposed to rebuild the country, died in disproportionately large numbers. The Ministry of Education estimated that 38% of civil servants were killed or seriously injured. The medical university lost 12% of its students and 30% of its faculty. The engineering school was completely destroyed. International response. By January 14th, the world began to respond. Rescue teams from the Dominican Republic were the first to arrive, via the land border. Then the U.S. military began deploying troops. Ultimately, the U.S. deployed 22,000 soldiers and 2,000 Marines. The Port-au-Prince airport became one of the busiest hubs on the planet. Over 1,300 flights landed in the first week. The problem was that planes carrying humanitarian aid were arriving faster than they could be unloaded. Cargo piled up because the roads were blocked and the port crane was destroyed. A slow-moving disaster. Following a rapid one by February, the acute phase had ended. The tallying began. Official Haitian statistics put the death toll at 316,000, but this figure is disputed. Some studies put the number at 230,000. A difference of 86,000 people is not a statistical error. It is an indication of just how chaotic the situation was. 1.5 million people lived in tent camps. At first, these were simply sheets stretched over sticks. Then real tents from humanitarian organizations appeared. In October 2010, 10 months after the earthquake, a cholera epidemic broke out in Haiti. The disease had not been seen in the country for over 100 years. The source was UN peacekeepers, whose untreated wastewater entered the Artibonite River. Over the following years, cholera killed more than 10,000 people and infected 820,000. The earthquake killed in seconds. Cholera killed over years. Conclusion. Today, in 2026, a third of the destroyed buildings in Port-au-Prince have still not been rebuilt. The Enriquillo Fault is still active. The country remains unstable, both politically and economically. 230,000 people died not because the earth shifted. They died because humanity allowed 3 million people to live in homes made of substandard concrete on a seismically active fault line in one of the world's poorest countries.